never thought my own son would call me incompetent in front of a judge. Your Honor, my mother no longer possesses the mental capacity to manage her affairs or this $90 million estate. The words hung in the air of Courtroom 305. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Not the wheelchair Calvin had insisted I use for appearances, but the sturdy wooden chair I'd demanded instead. At 72, my back remained straight as a pin, just as my grandmother had taught me. I watched the judge's eyes travel between us, from Calvin in his tailored navy suit to me in my modest cream dress and single strand of pearls. I recognized that fleeting calculation in his gaze. I'd seen it my entire life, deciding my worth before I'd spoken a single word. Your Honor, my mother no longer possesses the mental capacity to manage her affairs or this $90 million estate. The words hung in the air of Courtroom 305. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Not the wheelchair Calvin had insisted I use for appearances, but the sturdy wooden chair I demanded instead. At 72, my back remained straight as a pin, just as my grandmother had taught me. I watched the judge's eyes travel between us, from Calvin in his tailored navy suit to me in my modest cream dress and single strand of pearls. I recognized that fleeting calculation in his gaze. I'd seen it my entire life, deciding my worth before I'd spoken a single word. Mrs. Brooks appears confused about financial matters. Last month, she accused household staff of theft when she simply misplaced her jewelry. She forgets appointments. She wanders her property at night. Each lie landed like a slap. My attorney touched my wrist gently, warning me to keep calm. The medical assessment suggests early dementia, Calvin's lawyer added, sliding a folder across to the judge. For her protection and the preservation of assets she worked so hard to accumulate, we're requesting an emergency competency hearing. The courtroom suddenly felt too small, too airless. 3 rows back sat my daughter Monique, her eyes fixed on her folded hands. The betrayal ran deeper than anyone in this room realized. 6 months earlier, I'd been enjoying my morning coffee on the veranda of my Buckhead estate, watching cardinals flit between magnolia branches. 10 acres of paradise purchased with the proceeds from selling Brooks Home Care Services, the company I'd built from nothing but determination and faith. Mrs. Brooks, the judge addressed me directly, pulling me back to the painful present. These are serious allegations. Do you understand what your son is requesting? I removed my reading glasses and looked directly at Calvin, whose practiced mask of concern couldn't hide the hunger in his eyes. I'd seen that look before, when he was 7 and coveted his cousin's birthday presents, when he was 16 and demanded a car he hadn't earned, when he was 30 and asked me to fund his 3rd failed business venture. I understand perfectly, Your Honor. My son wants control of my money, every penny of it. Calvin's attorney jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this hostility only demonstrates our concerns about her paranoia. Paranoia? I almost laughed. Is it paranoia when the threat is real? When someone tries to take what you've built? The judge studied me over his glasses. Mrs. Brooks, building a $90 million business is no small achievement, but managing such wealth requires sharp faculties. My faculties are sharper than those trying to take advantage of me. I've been underestimated my entire life, for being black, for being a woman, and now for being old. But underestimating me has always been other people's mistake. For just a moment, uncertainty flashed across Calvin's face. He hadn't expected resistance. He thought I'd crumble, like the times I'd given in when he'd come begging for money, playing on my love and guilt. Not this time, not with everything at stake. Your Honor, Calvin's voice hardened, my mother needs protection from herself. Last week, she fired her longtime accountant for questioning a series of unusual withdrawals. What he didn't mention was that those unusual withdrawals were actually transfers he had initiated using my forged signature, something my accountant had indeed questioned, not out of concern for my competence, but for Calvin's honesty. The truth, I said, meeting the judge's eyes, is that my son has already attempted to access my accounts without permission. He's forged my signature on documents, and now he's trying to have me declared incompetent because I refused to give him what he wants. The courtroom erupted. Calvin's attorney demanded my comments be stricken from the record. The judge called for order. And through the chaos, Calvin stared at me with cold calculation. He thought this would be easy. He thought wrong. I hadn't fought my way up from nothing, hadn't built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch, hadn't survived losing my husband and raising 2 children alone just to have everything stolen by my own blood. Some battles you choose, others choose you. This one would test every ounce of strength I had left. What Calvin didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment longer than he realized. I had evidence hidden where he would never think to look. Evidence that would turn his carefully constructed case to dust. If you've ever been underestimated because of your age, you'll understand what happens next.
The judge ordered a recess after my explosive testimony. As I stepped outside the courtroom, memories flooded back, not of Calvin's betrayal, but of how I built the fortune he now coveted. I started at Grady Memorial Hospital in 1972 as a nurse's aide, making $1.85 an hour. Every night, I'd return to our cramped 2-bedroom apartment with aching feet and a spine stiff from lifting patients. Clarence, my husband then, would be waiting, sometimes with tenderness, other times with fists, depending on how much he'd had to drink. "You smell like other people's mess," he'd complain on bad nights. "Why you working so hard? Ain't nobody gonna promote a black woman anyway." Maybe he was right about the promotion part. 7 years I worked at that hospital without moving up, despite taking night classes in nursing. But Clarence was wrong about the rest. Every hour I spent bathing elderly patients, changing bedpans, and comforting the dying taught me something invaluable. Dignity matters, especially when you're vulnerable. After one particularly brutal night when Clarence broke my left wrist, I took the children and left. Monique was 8, Calvin 12. We moved into my cousin's basement in College Park. "Now what, Mama?" Calvin asked that first night, his young face already hardening with resentment. I didn't have an answer then, but within a week, I had a plan. Atlanta in the 1980s was changing. White flight had left elderly people stranded in transitioning neighborhoods without family nearby. Many needed help but couldn't afford full-time care or didn't require nursing homes. I started small, offering home visits after my hospital shifts, helping with medication, cooking meals, providing companionship. Word spread through church networks. Within 6 months, I had more clients than hours. "You need to hire someone," my cousin suggested. I hired 2 women from church, then 5 more. By 1985, Brooks Home Care Services employed 30 people. The obstacles were relentless. Banks refused loans despite my perfect payment history. "How do we know your kind can manage growth?" one loan officer asked, not bothering to hide his disdain. Potential clients in wealthy neighborhoods would see me at their door and suddenly reconsider their needs. Regulatory agencies scrutinized my paperwork with unnecessary thoroughness. "Give up," friends advised. You're fighting a system built against you. But stubbornness runs in my blood. For every rejection, I found a workaround. When banks denied conventional loans, I secured microloans from community development organizations. When wealthy white neighborhoods rejected my services, I partnered with respected white doctors who vouched for my company's quality. In 1989, Clarence died of liver failure. I hadn't seen him in years, but his death affected Calvin deeply. My son became more withdrawn, more entitled, as if his father's absence gave him license to demand more from me. By contrast, the business thrived. We expanded to 5 counties, then statewide. I developed specialized training programs for dementia care that became industry standards. Hospitals began referring patients to us exclusively. Through it all, I kept my grandmother's wisdom close. When they build walls, child, find the door. Ain't no wall been built that doesn't have a way through, over, or around. The acquisition offer came in 2015. A national healthcare consortium wanted Brooks Home Care Services, my training programs, my client network, my brand reputation. Their initial offer was $30 million. I countered at $100 million. We settled at $90 million. The day I signed those papers, hands steady despite arthritis, I thought about that nurse's aide from 1972 with her $1.85 hourly wage. How impossible this moment would have seemed to her. How many times the system had tried to break me. How many nights I'd stayed up balancing books after putting my children to bed. I bought the Buckhead estate the following month. 10 acres with gardens reminiscent of the ones my grandmother had tended in Birmingham. A home with enough bedrooms for my entire extended family during holidays. A sanctuary I'd earned through decades of sacrifice. What I didn't realize was that signing those acquisition papers had triggered something dangerous in Calvin, something calculating. While I saw the $90 million as validation of my life's work, he saw it only as his rightful inheritance, and he wasn't willing to wait for me to die to claim it. Stay with me through this journey. I promise this story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who's ever built something precious only to watch someone try to take it away.
The money changed everything, though the warning signs had been there all along. Calvin was 10 when I left his father, old enough to understand why Mama's arm was in a cast, young enough to believe his father's promises to change. When we fled to my cousin's basement, something hardened in Calvin that never softened again. "We'll get back on top, son," I promised him, night after night. "We Brooks don't stay down long." He took those words to heart in all the wrong ways. By the time the acquisition check cleared in 2016, Calvin had burned through 3 marriages and 5 business ventures. Each failure followed the same pattern: initial enthusiasm, early success, then collapse when sustained effort was required. "You just need to find your calling," I told him after his fitness center went bankrupt, costing me the $200,000 I'd invested. "My calling is to run something substantial," he replied, eyes fixed on my newly purchased estate. "Something already established." Monique was different. After college, she became an elementary school teacher in the same neighborhood where we'd once lived in that basement apartment. "Those kids need to see people like us succeed," she explained when I questioned why she chose a modest salary over more lucrative options. The first time I noticed something truly wrong was 3 months after purchasing the Buckhead estate. Calvin had been staying in one of the guest suites while between opportunities, as he called it. I came downstairs early one morning to find him at my desk, rifling through financial documents. "What are you doing?" I asked, startling him. He recovered quickly. "Just trying to understand your filing system, Mama. You know, in case anything happens to you." "Nothing's happening to me anytime soon." His laugh sounded hollow. "You're 70. Heart attacks, strokes, they happen in an instant." The casual mention of my death sent a chill through me. But more disturbing was what I found after he left. My estate planning binder, slightly rearranged, The corner of one document bent where it hadn't been before. When I mentioned it to Monique during our weekly lunch, her face clouded. "Mama, you need to be careful. Calvin's been asking me strange questions." "What kind of questions?" She hesitated. "About your will. About the house title. Whether you've been forgetting things." "Forgetting things? I remember everything down to a dress I wore to your 5th grade graduation." "I know that, but Calvin's been suggesting otherwise. He told Aunt Dorothy you got confused about which day church service was held." "That's ridiculous." "He's setting a narrative, Mama. I've seen it happening with my students' families. When someone wants to take control of an elderly relative's finances, they start by questioning their competence." I dismissed her concerns then. My Calvin wouldn't do that to me. Despite his flaws, I raised him better. 2 weeks later, he brought a woman to Sunday dinner, Eliza Hargrove, a wealth manager who specialized in senior transitions, as Calvin introduced her. "Mrs. Brooks, Calvin tells me you might be feeling overwhelmed managing your new wealth." "Does he now?" I set down my fork. "Funny, I managed to build that wealth just fine." "Of course, but managing assets in your golden years presents unique challenges. Cognitive changes are natural with aging." Calvin nodded sympathetically. "Mama, you forgot your doctor's appointment last week." "I didn't forget. I rescheduled because the garden club needed my help with the charity auction." He exchanged knowing glances with Eliza. "See what I mean?" That night, after they left, I sat alone in my study, truly frightened for the first time. The conversation replayed in my mind, each word now carrying sinister weight. Calvin was laying a groundwork, creating a paper trail of supposed incompetence. The next morning, I made 2 decisions that would ultimately save everything I'd built. First, I called my attorney, Giles Thompson, who had helped me negotiate the business sale. "Giles, I need to update my will and create some additional safeguards." "Any particular concerns, Evelyn?" I hesitated only briefly. "My son may be planning something I don't fully understand yet." Giles was silent for a moment. "Come in tomorrow and bring any documentation of unusual behavior." The second decision came after hanging up. I walked to my bedroom, pulled out the false bottom of my jewelry box, and retrieved a small key. This key opened a safety deposit box at Peachtree Federal Bank, a box I'd maintained for 30 years through poverty and wealth alike. Inside that box was a single document I'd created after leaving Clarence, a detailed account of his abuses with dates, photographs, and hospital records. I'd kept it as insurance in case he ever fought for custody of the children. After his death, I should have destroyed it, but something told me to hold on to it, to remember what happened when you trusted the wrong person. That afternoon, I returned to the bank and added a second document to the box. A handwritten letter detailing my growing concerns about Calvin with dates and specific incidents. At the bottom, I wrote, "If you're reading this after my death or disappearance, investigate my son first." I didn't know then how prophetic those words would become, or how that single piece of paper would eventually save everything I'd built. Could you spot a betrayal brewing in your own home? Subscribe to never be caught unaware.
The full scope of Calvin's plan revealed itself in 2 painful public moments, first at Thanksgiving, then at his wedding 2 weeks later. I'd spent days preparing for Thanksgiving dinner, determined to make our first holiday in the Buckhead estate memorable. My hands, stiff with arthritis, still managed to roll out perfect pie crusts and polish the silver candelabras that had belonged to my grandmother. The dining table, extended to its full length, gleamed under crystal chandeliers. "Mama, "You've created paradise," Monique whispered as she helped arrange name cards. She'd arrived early, bringing sweet potato pies and her quiet efficiency. By contrast, Calvin arrived 40 minutes late with his new fiancée, Eliza, the wealth manager who specialized in separating seniors from their money. No apology, just a quick kiss on my cheek as his eyes inventoried the room, counting relatives, assessing their influence. My brother, Joseph, raised his glass. "To Evelyn, whose determination brought us all to this beautiful home. You earned every brick, sister." Calvin's smile tightened. I'd seen that look since he was a boy. Jealousy masked his pride. Dinner progressed with familiar rhythms. Children hiding beneath cables, cousins debating politics, elders reminiscing about those no longer with us. For a few precious hours, the warmth of family pushed away my growing concerns. Then came coffee and dessert. Calvin stood abruptly, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The ringing silenced all conversation, eyes turning expectantly. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, straightening his silk tie. "To my mother, who built something extraordinary. From nothing, she created a healthcare empire that sold for $90 million. Glasses raised around the table. My cousin Dorothy squeezed my hand. "And all of it," Calvin continued, voice rising, "culminated in this magnificent estate." Something in his tone made my skin prickle with warning, which is why I'm excited to announce my plans for this property once I take ownership. The room froze. Forks paused midway to mouths. "What are you talking about?" Monique's voice cut through the silence. Calvin smiled, not at her, but at me. "Mama's not getting any younger. This place is too much for her to manage. We've discussed transferring ownership to me." "We most certainly have not," I said, keeping my voice level, though my heart hammered. "Now, Mama, your memory isn't what it used to be. We talked about this last month." My brother Joseph set down his glass with dangerous control. "Boy, you better watch yourself." "It's fine, Joseph." I folded my napkin precisely. My son seems confused about several things. First, my memory is excellent. Second, this property belongs to me alone. And third, I have no intention of selling or transferring it to anyone. Calvin's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "The estate planning attorney has already drawn up papers. It's the sensible move, Mama. At your age, you should be downsizing, not maintaining all this." The implication hung in the air, that I was too old, too feeble to manage my own property. Monique stood so quickly her chair nearly toppled. "That's enough, Calvin." The evening fractured after that. Family members made awkward excuses to leave early. My perfect Thanksgiving lay in ruins. But Calvin wasn't finished. His wedding to Eliza, held at the Piedmont Driving Club 2 weeks later, provided his next opportunity to undermine me publicly. I wore my finest dress, midnight blue silk with a modest pearl necklace. Monique escorted me, protective as always. We were seated in the front row, proper places for the groom's family. During the reception, Calvin clinked his glass for attention. The crowd of 200, mostly Eliza's wealthy connections, quieted. "I want to thank everyone for coming, especially my mother." He gestured toward me with his champagne. "Mom, stand up so everyone can see you." Reluctantly, I rose. "Many of you know my mother built a successful business. What you may not know is that lately, she's been struggling. Last week, she got lost driving in her own neighborhood, called me in a panic." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My cheeks burned with humiliation. "That never happened," I said firmly. Calvin continued as if I hadn't spoken. "We're moving her into assisted living next month. It's the responsible thing to do. Thankfully, I'll be taking over management of her estate to preserve her legacy." Whispers spread through the reception hall. Pitying glances turned my way. "Calvin Brooks," I spoke clearly, though my voice shook with rage rather than weakness, "you are lying to these good people. I have never been lost in my neighborhood, and I am not moving anywhere." "See what I mean?" He addressed the crowd with an exaggerated sigh. "These memory issues are why we're so concerned. Mom, please sit down. You're making a scene." Eliza appeared at his side, taking his arm possessively. "Don't upset yourself, Mrs. Brooks. We'll take good care of everything." The drive home passed in silence. Monique gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. "She's trying to destroy your reputation," she finally said. "Establish a public record of supposed mental decline." I stared out the window at the Atlanta skyline, buildings lit against the night sky. Each one represented someone's dream, someone's labor, just like my estate. Calvin always wanted shortcuts. He never understood that some things must be earned. That night, I made a decision. Opening my safe, I removed a document I'd prepared with my attorney, a restraining order against Calvin. I wouldn't file it yet, but it was ready. What I didn't know then was that Calvin had already taken the next step, a step that would force me into the courtroom where our story began. Silent strength often speaks louder than boastful words.
3 days after Calvin's wedding, my phone rang at 7:15 a.m. The screen displayed my attorney's name. Giles Thompson never called this early unless something was wrong. "Evelyn," his voice carried unusual tension. "Are you sitting down?" My chest tightened. "What's happened?" "Someone came to my office yesterday with property transfer documents for your Buckhead estate. They had your signature on them." He paused. "Or what appeared to be your signature." The room tilted slightly. "I never signed any property transfer." "I know that. The signature looked close, but not perfect, especially compared to the documentation we have on file. I refuse to process anything." His voice lowered. "Evelyn, it was Calvin who brought them in." Despite the mounting evidence of my son's betrayal, hearing confirmation still stole my breath. One thing to suspect, another to know. "There's more," Giles continued. "He claimed you'd verbally agreed to transfer ownership due to cognitive decline, but had forgotten signing the papers." My fingers gripped the phone so tightly my arthritic joints protested. "That's absurd!" "I agree, which is why I called immediately." "But Evelyn," Giles hesitated. "He mentioned filing for emergency guardianship if I didn't cooperate. Said he has a psychiatrist ready to testify about your condition." The walls of my beautiful home suddenly felt like a cage. "What do we do?" "First, check your financial accounts, all of them. If he's willing to forge property documents, he may have accessed other assets." After hanging up, I opened my laptop with trembling fingers. I'd insisted on maintaining control of my online banking despite Calvin's repeated offers to manage things for me. Now I understood why. What I found made my blood run cold. 3 large transfers had been attempted from my primary account in the past month: $250,000, $175,000, and $500,000. The bank had flagged them as suspicious and required in-person verification, which explained why they hadn't gone through. But smaller transfers, $9,000 here, $8,500 there, had been successfully processed, amounts just under the $10,000 threshold that would trigger reporting requirements. In total, nearly $80,000 had disappeared. I called the bank immediately. "Mrs. Brooks, those transfers were authorized using your online credentials. The IP address matches previous logins from your home network." Calvin. He'd been staying in my guest suite, using my home Wi-Fi. Had he watched me enter my password? Installed something on my computer? "I want all accounts frozen immediately," I instructed. "And I need to know where those transfers went." The funds were directed to Brooks Investment Partners, LLC, a company I'd never heard of. A quick online search revealed it had been formed just 3 months earlier. The listed manager? Calvin Brooks. My son had created a shell company to siphon my money. I sat motionless at my desk, watching sunlight creep across the hand-knotted Persian rug, a gift I'd bought myself after the business sale. Every thread represented hours of work, years of sacrifice. just like everything in this house, just like the money Calvin was stealing. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Through the security monitor, I saw Calvin standing on my porch, smiling confidently. I almost didn't answer, but some confrontations can't be avoided. "Morning, Mama," he breezed in without waiting for an invitation, expensive cologne trailing him. "You look tired. Not sleeping well?" I studied my son, this stranger wearing familiar features. When had the sweet boy who cried over injured birds transformed into this calculating man? I just got off the phone with Giles and the bank. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Oh! They mentioned forged transfer documents and unauthorized withdrawals to a company called Brooks Investment Partners. Now his smile faltered. "Mama, you're confused. We discussed those transfers, therefore diversifying your portfolio." "Stop it," my voice cut like steel. "Stop lying to my face in my own home. Stop pretending I'm confused when you're stealing from me." Calvin's facade collapsed. His handsome face hardened into something ugly, something that reminded me too much of his father in our worst moments. "You're being dramatic." He paced my foyer, designer shoes clicking against marble floors I paid for. "This isn't stealing. It's securing what's already mine." "None of this is yours, Calvin." He laughed without humor. "Really? Who do you think you built all this for? Your precious business, this ridiculous house. What was the point if not for your children to inherit?" "Inherit, yes. Steal, no. There's a difference." He stopped pacing, turned to face me. "You know what the difference is. About 20 years. 20 years I have to wait while you live in this mansion, spending my inheritance on gardeners and charity galas." The naked greed in his voice horrified me. "Your inheritance? You mean the money I earned? The house I bought? With the business I helped you build?" This boldest lie yet left me momentarily speechless. Calvin had never worked a day at Brooks Home Care Services. "That's why I need control now," he continued, voice softening to the persuasive tone he'd used to extract money for years. "You're making poor decisions, Mama. That charity donation last month, $500,000 to people you barely know." He meant the scholarship fund I'd established at Spelman College, a cause dear to my heart. "This isn't just about you anymore. That money is my future. Eliza and I have plans." The pieces clicked into place. His sudden marriage to a wealth manager, the timing of the forgery attempts, the development plans announced at Thanksgiving. "You and Eliza planned this from the beginning," I said slowly. "Her specialty isn't helping seniors manage wealth, it's helping their children take it." Calvin didn't deny it. "She understands what's at stake, and she has connections to make things happen." "Like finding doctors to declare me incompetent?" His silence was confirmation enough. "Get out of my house." My voice remained steady, though my heart raced. "You are no longer welcome here." Instead of leaving, Calvin stepped closer. "You can't cut me out. I'm filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow. When the judge sees the evidence we've prepared, the memory lapses, the erratic spending, the paranoid accusations, they'll understand you need protection from yourself. Evidence you fabricated." He shrugged. "It doesn't matter. By the time you fight it, the estate will be under my control." As he turned to leave, satisfaction radiating from his posture, I remembered something. A precaution I'd taken years ago, when the business was first becoming successful. Something hidden that could change everything. "Calvin," I called after him, "there's one document you don't know about. One paper you can never find or forge." He paused at the door. "What are you talking about?" "If your plan was forward,
That document will destroy everything you're trying to build, everything you and Eliza have planned. Uncertainty flickered across his face, the first genuine emotion I'd seen. You're bluffing. Try me. After he left, I sat alone in my silent house, my son's betrayal hanging in the air like poison. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and courtrooms, accusations and evidence, a battle I'd never expected to fight. That night, I drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of Atlanta, a place Calvin knew nothing about. Inside my unit, beneath boxes of business records, lay a waterproof container with documents no one had seen in decades. Insurance against a day I'd prayed would never come. The most dangerous predators often wear familiar faces.
The emergency guardianship hearing was scheduled for Monday. Calvin didn't wait until then to strike. By Friday evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Church members, business associates, even my hairdresser of 20 years, all calling with concerns after encountering Calvin. "Evelyn, he said you've been hallucinating," my pastor's wife whispered. "Said you accused the gardener of planting listening devices in your rose bushes." My bridge club president was next. "Calvin mentioned you got lost driving to our weekly game. Said he found you confused at a gas station 5 miles away." Each call brought a new fabricated incident, each more outlandish than the last. My supposed decline had meticulously crafted elements: memory lapses, paranoia, confusion, and poor financial judgment. Calvin had studied symptoms of dementia to create his fiction. "It's a calculated campaign," Monique said when she arrived Saturday morning, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by notepads filled with calls I'd received. "He's turning the community against you before you even get to court." "But why would people believe him without evidence?" She took my hand. "Mama, people want to believe we decline as we age. It fits their expectations, especially for a Black woman in her 70s. Calvin's just feeding a narrative they're primed to accept." Sunday brought the most painful blow. As I entered Bethel AME Church, where I'd been a member for 40 years, conversations hushed. Sympathetic glances followed me down the aisle. The deacon who helped me to my usual pew patted my hand with exaggerated gentleness, as if I might shatter. During announcements, prayer requests included one for Sister Evelyn Brooks as she faces health challenges. I'd never mentioned any health issues. Calvin had reached my spiritual home, planting seeds of doubt in sacred ground. Monday morning arrived with biting clarity. I dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit, pearls at my throat, hair freshly pressed. My appearance would be scrutinized for any sign of neglect or confusion. The Fulton County Courthouse loomed like a fortress. Reporters clustered near the entrance. Calvin had alerted the press, recognizing that public humiliation would serve his purpose. "Mrs. Brooks, is it true you're suffering from dementia? Do you feel capable of managing your $90 million estate? Has your son expressed concerns about your mental health before now?" I walked past them, spine straight, eyes forward, Monique and Giles flanking me protectively. Inside Courtroom B, Calvin and Eliza sat with their attorney, Pierce Davidson, one of Atlanta's most expensive lawyers. Calvin had dressed down, I noticed immediately. Gone was his usual designer flash, replaced by a modest charcoal suit and conservative tie. Playing the concerned, responsible son rather than the flashy spender of my money. Judge Walter Garrison entered, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for efficiency bordering on impatience. Calvin's strategy unfolded with ruthless precision. First came Dr. Raymond Fulton, a neurologist who had never examined me. Based on the reported symptoms, Dr. Fulton testified, Mrs. Brooks displays classic signs of early-stage dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. Paranoid accusations, financial mismanagement, disorientation, these all suggest diminished capacity. "Objection!" Giles stood. "Dr. Fulton has never evaluated my client." Judge Garrison frowned.
The doctor is speaking hypothetically based on reported behaviors. Overruled. Next came my former housekeeper, Teresa, who left my employment 3 months earlier after being caught stealing. Mrs. Brooks would forget conversations we'd just had. She'd hide jewelry, then accuse me of taking it. Once, she wandered outside at 3 a.m. in her nightgown, confused about what day it was. Each lie landed like a physical blow. This woman had worked in my home for years, shared meals at my table, received generous bonuses. Now she collected what I assumed was an equally generous payment from Calvin. The afternoon brought 2 neighbors, a pharmacist, and Calvin himself to the stand. Each testimony painted the same picture. Evelyn Brooks, once sharp and capable, now declining rapidly, unable to manage her affairs, putting herself at risk. Last month, Calvin testified, voice breaking perfectly, I found Mama trying to write a check for $50,000 to a telephone scammer claiming to be from the IRS. When I intervened, she accused me of stealing from her. A complete fabrication. The telephone scammer had been my legitimate tax attorney discussing year-end charitable contributions. Throughout the day, Judge Garrison's expression grew increasingly sympathetic toward Calvin. When Giles attempted to question the reliability of witnesses, Garrison cut him short. When I tried to pass notes to my attorney, the judge frowned disapprovingly, as if my participation proved my incompetence. By day's end, exhaustion pressed on me like a physical weight. My case wouldn't be presented until tomorrow, but the damage felt overwhelming. As the court adjourned, I overheard Judge Garrison speaking to his clerk. Seems straightforward, the son's evidence is compelling. Walking out, reporters shouted more questions. One thrust a microphone toward me. Mrs. Brooks, how does it feel knowing your own son thinks you're incompetent? I stopped, despite Giles's warning hand on my arm. It feels like having your voice stolen, like screaming the truth in a crowded room where everyone has decided to go deaf. That night, alone in my kitchen, I called Monique. They're not going to believe me, are they? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. Mama, don't give up. Your testimony is tomorrow. The judge has already decided. I saw it in his eyes. After hanging up, I sat in darkness, contemplating the hidden document I'd retrieved from storage. Using it would destroy any chance of reconciliation with Calvin. It would expose family wounds I'd spent decades trying to heal. But as I watched headlights sweep across my garden, another reporter, or perhaps Calvin checking whether I was wandering again, I made my decision. Sometimes, the only way forward is to burn the bridge you're standing on. Have you ever had your voice dismissed? Comment yes if you know this feeling.
I barely slept that night, memories flooding back each time I closed my eyes. Not just memories of Calvin's betrayal, but older ones from 30 years ago when I first understood the need to protect myself. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep. Moving quietly through my darkened home, I entered my study and unlocked the hidden compartment behind my bookshelf. Inside lay a weathered metal box, unassuming, scratched from decades of storage. My fingers traced its dented surface, remembering the day I first concealed it. Calvin was 17, Monique 13. We were living in our first real house after years in apartments, nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom in College Park. Clarence had been gone 5 years by then, but his shadow still darkened our lives. That particular morning, I'd caught Calvin going through my bedroom drawers, searching for cash. When confronted, he'd raged, breaking a lamp, punching holes in the wall, his father's temper emerging in my son. "You owe me," he'd shouted. "After what he did to us, after everything, you owe me a better life." That night, after the children slept, I drove to a hardware store across town and bought the metal box. Inside, I placed photographs of the damage Calvin had caused, along with a handwritten account of his outburst. I added the police reports from Clarence's abuse, hospital records from my broken wrist, and letters I'd written but never sent about my fears for Calvin's future. The box went into a storage unit rented under my maiden name. Insurance, I told myself. Protection against patterns repeating across generations. Over the years, I added to it documentation of loans never repaid, evidence of Calvin's early forgery attempts when he needed money for his first business, notes about concerning behavior toward women, toward authority figures, toward anyone who denied him what he wanted. I never intended to use these records against my son. They were meant as private testimony, proof that I wasn't blind to his flaws, just hopeful he would overcome them. But now, in the pre-dawn darkness of my Buckhead estate, that hope lay shattered. I opened the box and spread its contents across my desk. Decades of evidence showing Calvin's escalating entitlement, manipulation, and dishonesty. Not the actions of a concerned son worried about his mother's mental decline, but a calculated predator with a lifelong pattern. The most damning document was one I'd added just after selling the business, a letter Calvin had written demanding an advance on his inheritance. "It's my money anyway once you're gone. Why make me wait while you waste it on charity?" I refused. He'd apologized, claiming stress had made him write such terrible things. I'd forgiven him, but kept the letter. Now I understood its true value. As dawn broke across Atlanta, painting my garden in soft gold light, clarity came with it. The evidence in this box could destroy Calvin's case and Calvin himself. But presented wrongly, it might seem like the desperate accusations of a vindictive old woman. The judge already doubted me. I needed to be smarter than direct confrontation. I pulled out fresh stationery and began writing, my hand steady despite everything. Not a lengthy explanation or emotional plea, but a cryptic message designed to intrigue rather than accuse. Your Honor, before ruling on this case, you should know about what lies beneath the foundation of truth. Your son believes he knows everything about me and my estate. He doesn't. I have never suffered from memory loss or confusion. I have only suffered from trusting someone who sees my lifetime of work as his entitlement. If you truly seek justice, ask about the metal box hidden for 30 years. Ask what a mother keeps when she fears her son is becoming her father. With respect, Evelyn Brooks. I sealed the note in a cream envelope, writing "For Judge Garrison's eyes only" across the front. Next, I called Giles. I need something unusual in court today. When it's my turn to testify, I want to hand the judge this envelope directly. Evelyn, that's not standard procedure. Everything should go through. Nothing about this case is standard. I interrupted. Trust me, Giles, this is our only chance. After hanging up, I dressed carefully in a deep purple suit. Not the subdued navy of yesterday's defensive posture, but the royal color of someone reclaiming power. The judge would see a woman confident in her faculties, not cowering under false accusations. As my car navigated morning traffic toward downtown, I rehearsed what would happen next. Calvin would expect me to fight back with angry denials. The judge would expect emotional pleas or medical counter-evidence. No one would anticipate what was actually coming. That's the thing about patience. It allows you to see all the chess moves while your opponent plays checkers. For 30 years, I'd preserved evidence I prayed I'd never need. For 30 years, I'd watched Calvin's patterns without confronting them. And for 30 years, I'd been underestimated because of my age, my gender, my race. Time to use that underestimation as a weapon. I touched the envelope in my purse, feeling the weight of decades within its paper walls. By day's end, everything would change. Patience is a weapon the impatient never see coming.
Day 2 of the guardianship hearing began like the first. Reporters clustered outside the courthouse, spectators filling benches, Calvin and Eliza presenting a united front of concerned family members.
The only difference was me. Yesterday, I'd entered feeling defensive. Today, I walked in with purpose, the sealed envelope secure in my handbag. Judge Garrison called the court to order, peering over his glasses. We'll continue with testimony from Mrs. Brooks herself. His tones suggested this was merely a formality before granting Calvin's petition. I took the stand, feeling every eye in the courtroom. Calvin watched with the confident expression of someone who believed victory was already his. Pierce Davidson, his attorney, arranged papers with theatrical precision, preparing for what he assumed would be an easy cross-examination. Giles approached. Mrs. Brooks, could you tell the court about your current mental state and ability to manage your affairs? I'm perfectly capable of managing my life and finances. The accusations against me are fabricated by my son for one purpose: gaining control of my $90 million estate. Calvin shook his head sadly, playing his role for the judge. Mrs. Brooks, Giles continued, do you have any evidence to counter the medical opinions we've heard? This was my opening. I reached into my handbag and withdrew the cream envelope. Your Honor, before answering further questions, I'd like to submit this directly to you. Judge Garrison frowned. Mrs. Brooks, evidence must be processed through proper channels. Please, I interrupted, something I'd never normally do. This contains information relevant to these proceedings that only you should see first. Perhaps it was the unusual nature of the request. Perhaps it was something in my steady gaze. Whatever the reason, Judge Garrison extended his hand. Approach the bench, Mrs. Brooks. I walked forward, acutely aware of Calvin shifting in his seat. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. The judge accepted the envelope, opened it, and read my note. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes flicked toward Calvin, then back to me. Mrs. Brooks, this is highly irregular. You're alleging your son has a history that contradicts his testimony? I have documentation, Your Honor, 30 years of it. Where is this documentation now? In a storage unit registered under my maiden name. The address is included in that note. Judge Garrison studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Court will recess for 2 hours while I consider this matter. As the gavel struck, Calvin was immediately at his attorney's side, whispering urgently. He hadn't anticipated this development. His script didn't include mysterious notes or hidden evidence. Monique found me in the hallway. What did you give him, Mama? The truth, I said simply. Something Calvin forgot I've been collecting since before he could drive. The 2-hour recess stretched to 3, then 4. By late afternoon, rumors circulated that Judge Garrison had left the courthouse. Court officers offered no explanations. Calvin paced the corridor, his confident facade crumbling with each passing hour. At 4:45 p.m., the bailiff finally announced court would reconvene. We filed back into the now tense courtroom. Judge Garrison entered, his demeanor markedly different. Behind him came 2 uniformed police officers and a woman in a business suit carrying my metal box. My heart jumped. He hadn't just read my note, he'd retrieved the evidence himself. This court has examined evidence that dramatically changes the nature of these proceedings. I spent the afternoon reviewing documentation that spans 3 decades. The box sat open on his bench. Inside, my careful records of Calvin's history, the fraud attempts, the threatening letters, the financial manipulations. Mr. Brooks, the judge addressed Calvin directly, this box contains substantial evidence that you have engaged in a systematic campaign to undermine your mother's credibility and gain control of her assets through fraudulent means. Calvin stood abruptly. Your Honor, whatever she's shown you is clearly fabricated. The documentation includes bank records of unauthorized transfers to Brooks Investment Partners, LLC. It includes letters in your handwriting demanding your inheritance years ago. Most damningly, it includes evidence of multiple forgery attempts dating back to 2010. The color drained from Calvin's face. Furthermore, the judge continued,
During this recess, I authorized a forensic examination of recent financial transactions from Mrs. Brooks' accounts. The evidence suggests you used her home network to access her accounts without authorization. Pierce Davidson jumped up. Your Honor, we had no opportunity to examine or challenge this supposed evidence. The court also received confirmation from Peachtree Federal Bank regarding recent forgery attempts of Mrs. Brooks' signature on property transfer documents. The handwriting analysis confirms those forgeries match Mr. Brooks' writing samples. Calvin lunged toward the exit, but one of the police officers blocked his path. Calvin Brooks, you are under arrest for attempted fraud, financial exploitation of an elder, identity theft, and computer crimes. Time seemed to slow down as handcuffs clicked around my son's wrists. His eyes, so like his father's, locked onto mine with pure hatred. You planned this, he hissed as they led him past me. You set me up. No, Calvin, I said quietly. You did this yourself. I just kept the receipts. Monique slipped out during the commotion, abandoning her husband as quickly as she joined his scheme. Judge Garrison addressed me directly. Mrs. Brooks, this court offers its sincere apologies. Your petition to dismiss all guardianship claims is granted. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Calvin Brooks from coming within 500 feet of you or your property. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Reporters rushed out to file breaking stories. Monique gripped my hand, tears streaming down her face. As we left the courthouse, camera flashes illuminated the twilight. One reporter thrust a microphone toward me. Mrs. Brooks, how does it feel to be vindicated? I paused, finding the right words. Bittersweet. No mother wants to see her child in handcuffs, but no mother should accept being betrayed by the child she raised. That night, sitting on my veranda overlooking gardens now truly secure, I felt no triumph, only relief tinged with grief. The battle was won, but at devastating cost. My son would face criminal charges. My family was fractured. The victory tasted like ashes. But beneath the sadness lay a quiet certainty. I had protected what was mine, not just the estate or the money, but my dignity, my autonomy, my right to determine my own future. Justice may be delayed, but with wisdom, it's never denied.
1 week after Calvin's arrest, the media frenzy began to subside. My phone stopped ringing constantly. Reporters no longer camped at my gate. The community that had so quickly believed Calvin's lies now sent awkward apology notes and casserole dishes. I sat alone in my garden that Saturday morning, watching butterflies dance between roses I'd planted myself. The wounds remained fresh, but peace was returning, until I heard the crunch of tires on my driveway. Monique's modest sedan pulled up, unusual for her unannounced arrival. Something in her posture as she walked toward me, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, sent a warning through my chest. "Mama," she said softly, settling beside me on the garden bench, "there's something I need to tell you." Her hands trembled as she placed a folder between us. "What's this, baby?" I asked, though something in me already knew. "Evidence," she whispered. "Evidence I should have given to the court. Evidence of my involvement." The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath me. "Your involvement in what exactly?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "In the beginning, I helped Calvin." The confession hung in the fragrant air. My daughter, my quiet, trustworthy Monique, had betrayed me too, the one child I thought I could depend on. "I didn't know how far he would go. He came to me 6 months ago, said he was worried about you making impulsive financial decisions, said you'd been giving away too much money to charities instead of securing our inheritance." "And you believed him?" "Not completely, but then he showed me documents, donation records, property assessments. He said if things continued, there would be nothing left. She looked up, eyes pleading. "He convinced me you needed guidance, not control, protection, not theft." I opened the folder. Inside were early drafts of the guardianship petition, emails between Monique and Calvin discussing their concerns, and a signature practice sheet, Monique learning to copy my handwriting. "You helped him forge documents." My voice sounded distant even to myself. "Just once, on a bank authorization form. After that, I realized what he really wanted. When he started talking about selling your home, about placing you in assisted living, I backed out." Her voice cracked. "But I should have done more. I should have warned you immediately." The betrayal cut deeper than Calvin's. From him, I'd grown to expect manipulation. From Monique, my conscientious, empathetic daughter, this blind spot seemed inconceivable. Why come forward now? "Calvin has been arrested. The case is closed." "Because I can't live with this lie between us." She straightened her spine, meeting my gaze directly. "I'm going to the district attorney tomorrow to confess my role. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'll likely face probation, maybe community service, but I'll accept whatever consequences come." Unlike Calvin's calculated performance in court, Monique's remorse rang genuine. Where he'd projected blame outward, she pulled responsibility inward. "The money never mattered to me, Mama. I got confused about what family means, about protecting legacy versus protecting you. Calvin talked about preserving what you built, but he never understood that you are what you built. Your dignity, your independence, your right to decide." I sat in silence, processing this second earthquake after I thought the ground had finally steadied. "I don't expect forgiveness," Monique added. "I just needed you to hear the truth from me before you heard it elsewhere." As she rose to leave, I caught her wrist. "Why did you stop helping him? What changed?" She paused. "I overheard him talking to Eliza about your memory, planning how to document incidents that never happened. They laughed about it, Mama, about gaslighting you into believing you were losing your mind." Her voice hardened. "That's when I knew this wasn't about protection, it was about possession." After she left, I remained in my garden until sunset, contemplating the layers of betrayal, how Calvin had manipulated not just me but his sister, playing on different vulnerabilities but with the same ruthless precision. That night, I wrote 2 letters, one to my attorney, confirming I would not press additional charges against Monique after her confession, the second to Monique herself, harder to compose but necessary to write. Betrayal from those we trust cuts deepest, but the path to healing begins with truth. You chose truth when lies would have been easier. That choice matters, though the pain remains. I didn't write, "I forgive you." Those words weren't ready yet. But I left the door open to a possibility Calvin had closed with his own actions. Would you forgive such a betrayal? Tell me in the comments.
6 months passed. Seasons changed. Justice took its measured course. Calvin pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges: financial exploitation of an elder, forgery, computer fraud. The district attorney, perhaps seeking headlines, pushed for maximum penalties. The judge sentenced him to 8 years, eligible for parole after 4. I attended the sentencing hearing alone. Our eyes met briefly as deputies led him away. No words exchanged, just a final acknowledgement of what we lost. Monique received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service after her voluntary confession.
She now works with elder advocacy groups, teaching financial professionals to recognize signs of exploitation. Our relationship rebuilds slowly. Sunday dinners, careful conversations, trust growing back like a garden after winter, tentative green shoots pushing through hard ground. Eliza filed for annulment and disappeared back into whatever world she inhabited before targeting my family. The associates who testified falsely against me faced their own legal consequences. My former housekeeper, Teresa, pleaded guilty to perjury. The community that has so quickly abandoned me worked equally hard to make amends. I accepted their gestures with grace, but kept a new, necessary distance. Fairweather friends had shown their true nature. My home remains mine. The money remains under my control. But possessions mean less to me now than clarity. Seeing people as they truly are, not as I wish them to be. Last week, I received my first letter from Calvin. Prison stationery, cramped handwriting I recognized immediately. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I understand what I threw away. Not just freedom, but the relationship with the strongest person I've ever known. Too little too late? Perhaps. But seeds need time to germinate in darkness before they reach for light. Yesterday, I visited my attorney to finalize my updated will and advance directives. No loose ends this time. No vulnerabilities for anyone to exploit. Evelyn, Giles asked as I signed the documents, after everything that's happened, how do you keep moving forward? The question deserved careful consideration. When you've been underestimated your entire life, you develop muscles others don't know exist. The muscle of perseverance, the muscle of seeing clearly when others try to cloud your vision, the muscle of standing alone when necessary. I paused, thinking of my journey from nurse's aide to business owner to survivor of family betrayal. And I learned that age isn't weakness, it's wisdom accumulated through fire. Every gray hair represents a lesson learned. Every line on my face maps a battle I've won. Today, sitting in my garden watching spring blooms unfold, I reflect on everything that's happened. The son who betrayed me, the daughter finding redemption, the system that almost failed me until truth broke through. My story isn't just about family betrayal or elder exploitation. It's about refusing to be diminished by others' perception of your value. It's about protecting what you've built, not just material wealth, but your dignity, your autonomy, your right to self-determination. No matter your age, your gender, your race, no one has the right to steal your voice, to declare you incompetent when you're still roaring with competence, to decide your time of relevance has passed when you're still writing your story. I am Evelyn Brooks, 72 years strong, battle-tested and victorious. My $90 million remains intact, but my true wealth lies in finally seeing clearly both the capacity for betrayal and the capacity for redemption that exist in those we love. Guard your blessings. Protect what you've built. Trust your instincts when they whisper warnings. Document everything. Prepare for storms even in sunshine. And remember, you're never too old, too quiet, or too kind to fight for what's rightfully yours. Join me in proving it's never too late to rise. Subscribe now.